Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
It's our nature unit for the month of May. If you like the great outdoors, Taiwan, of course, is a great place to be. You can head to the beach, you could head to the mountains, and you can check out all sorts of wildlife here. But we might be having some problems here as they're having problems in other parts of the world. The problem of invasive species. Animal and plants that come from outside and cause problems for the local environment.
Yeah, sometimes they're really quite harmful to the environment. I didn't know this was a problem in Taiwan, that we've got some sort of iguana that is breeding a lot. So we're getting a lot of these iguanas, and they're not good for the environment. And we need to be careful because it's affecting the environment, the growth of plants. And I think it also affects other little creatures that are native to Taiwan. The iguana we're talking about is not native to Taiwan. Someone brought it in.
Exactly. So I'm sure you're all aware of that problem. I haven't seen iguanas up here in the north, but I understand they're quite common down south, and they are causing problems. And there are other animals that have gotten into Taiwan as well. I think there was a problem with fire ants a number of years ago.
Oh, those are bad.
But I think that problem was contained successfully. Yeah, this problem is worldwide, so we're going to talk about it today, and we're going to try to tell you how invasive species put the environment in danger. So let's get to it. Let's read the entire contents one time. You may have heard the phrase breeding like rabbits before, but in Taiwan, breeding like iguanas might be more apt. The main island has experienced an explosion in wild green iguana populations. Since 2015, their numbers have multiplied 27 times over. Though harmless individually, in their current numbers, they're endangering local plants and other animals competing for the same food. Officials are working to curb their numbers, but these lizards are just one example of an invasive species which can have destructive effects on ecosystems. What makes a species invasive? The species in question isn't endemic to the local environment, but adapts remarkably well, reproduces quickly, and spreads aggressively through others' habitats. Species that do this with the potential to cause harm are labeled invasive. They can be any living thing from insects to reptiles to even plants and fungi. Once these species grow in number, they consume so many resources that they endanger the lives of local species. The way that non-native organisms arrive in other ecosystems is mainly through human activity. As people travel, we often bring other living things with us, whether we intend to do so or not. Ships might ferry aquatic species or small land animals across the sea, and some plants imported for cultivation in enclosed gardens can escape and become wild. As for Taiwan's green iguanas, officials presume the original wild generation was comprised of pets released by irresponsible owners. Managing the numbers of invasive species is an uphill battle, but it's one we all can help with. Be cautious with which plants you grow and opt for native species over exotic ones. Learn about invasive species in your area and report any sightings to a local land manager. If we're responsible for the choices we make, we can help to fight off invaders in our ecosystems.
Okay, folks, it's our nature unit. Let's take a look at the title because we've got a vocabulary word in there. How invasive species put the environment in danger. Invasive, especially if you're talking about plants or animals or even a disease. Invasive means it tends to spread quickly and it could cause harm or be very undesirable. And that's what we're going to be talking about Now, a species, of course, could be applied to plants or animals. We use it for both. So a group or a classification of a type of plant would be a species, the human species. So let's move on to the first paragraph. You may have heard the phrase, breeding like rabbits. If you breed like rabbits, it means you have a lot of babies. So if you're breeding, because rabbits tend to breed very quickly. Oh boy. But in Taiwan, breeding like iguanas might be more apt. So we're going to be focusing on an invasive species that has something to do with this iguana. Now, if you're talking about something being apt, it just means it's suitable, it's appropriate for that situation. Or it could also mean another thing. This is the second definition. Apt to do something just means you have a tendency to do something. I'm apt to wake up very early in the morning, even if I go to bed late, because I'm an early riser. So I try not to stay up too late because I can't sleep in. I'm apt to wake up too early. But here it means apt, being appropriate or suitable for whatever you're talking about. So yeah, I guess we've got a lot of iguanas that are breeding like rabbits here.
Yeah, except they're breeding like iguanas. That's more suitable, more apt. Maybe you've heard of the wrestler Hulk Hogan. That's a very apt name, okay? He is a big guy. Hulk kind of means you're really big and strong, so that's a very apt, appropriate name for him. And yes, this phrase might be more appropriate if it were expressed as breeding like iguanas, although the phrase is actually breeding like rabbits if you talk about animals or people producing a lot of children. Now, the main island of Taiwan, which would be Taiwan as opposed to Penghu and Lanyu and places like that, the offshore islands, the main island here has experienced an explosion in wild green iguana populations, and that has occurred since 2015. Their numbers have multiplied since that time 27 times over.
Wow.
So, my goodness, they're doing quite well here. Those green iguanas are reproducing. Indeed, they are breeding like rabbits.
And you might think, oh, no big deal. What's the harm? Well, individually, I guess they're a little bit harmless, it says, but in their current numbers, they're endangering local plants and other animals competing for the same food. They all need to eat. And so if you have competition for the food that you like to eat to survive, that might put your life in risk or endanger your life. To endanger just means to be put into a situation where you're at risk or in danger some way. So these little iguanas sound harmless, but they're not. They're endangering the local plants and other animals that are native to Taiwan because they're all competing for the same food. So the food is kind of limited. So what is happening? Well, officials, those are people who probably work for the government, they're working to curb their numbers. If you curb something, you lessen it or restrain it. You try to stop it from exceeding a certain limit. So they're trying to restrain or lessen their numbers. But these lizards, and that's what an iguana is, they're in the lizard family. They're just one example of an invasive species. There are more that we could tell you about, which can have destructive effects on ecosystems. Now, when you talk about an ecosystem, you're talking about the plants, the animals, the environment, like how much land there is, the water that's available. All of these things together make up an ecosystem.
That's right. So if you have a species of plants or animals or insects or whatever that come into an area, they can cause problems. They can have destructive effects on those ecosystems. And even though Taiwan is an island, it still is not separate from the rest of the world. Somehow, these animals and plants get into Taiwan and cause problems. So the term is invasive species. And what makes a species invasive? Yeah, what is the definition of this word, invasive. That's from the word invade, or at least it's related to that word. To invade just means to go into a place and try to take it over and cause problems, etc., etc. Japan invaded lots of countries during World War II, for example. And so in this particular case, what makes a species invasive? Well, the species in question, the species that we're talking about, isn't endemic to the local environment. It does not come from here, but adapts remarkably well, reproduces quickly, and spreads aggressively through others' habitats. So I can think of one example here in Taiwan of an invasive species, the common myna. They're all over Taiwan, but they're actually not from Taiwan. I believe they're from India and South Asia there. Somehow they got into Taiwan, and so they adapted very well, and they reproduced quickly. They had lots and lots of babies, and their population exploded. And, of course, they have spread aggressively through others' habitats. Aggressively is an adverb here. It's from the adjective aggressive, which means, hey, you don't let anything stop you. You're full of energy, and you're very competitive, and you don't take no for an answer. For example, sometimes you have to be very aggressive if you want to get ahead in business.
Now, is this here the species in question, the one we're talking about, isn't endemic to the local environment? Endemic is an adjective, and it means something that's regularly found among particular people or in a certain area. It's usually used to talk about some sort of disease or condition. So this particular iguana it doesn't really belong to our local environment, but it adapts remarkably well. And as Tom said, it reproduces quickly, has more babies, and spreads aggressively through others' habitats. So it moves in on other plants and animals that had been there for a long time and makes use of their food. We're going to talk more about this invasive species. But first, guys, we're going to listen to our Chinese teacher.
Hello, my name is Shelby. 标题说入侵物种会危害环境。第一题是破题，点出 iguana 大量繁殖危害环境。第一句，你可能听过 breeding like rabbits， 这是表达很会繁殖，兔子很会生。接着呢，但是在台湾 breeding like iguanas 像绿鬣蜥一样繁殖，可能更 apt 适当的。下一句，这岛屿已经经历一个1在野生的鬣蜥数量 a 或 n 之后要放单数名词，并且当 experienced 受词表示经历什么。后面说这数量已经超过27倍，表示暴增，所以答案选 G explosion。第二题。Though 2 individually 以他们目前的数量，他们正在 endangering 危害当地的植物和动物来竞争食物。第二题可以放分词或形容词搭配 though 虽然有语义的转折，大数量会造成影响，可以推知绿鬣蜥 individually 单独的应该是无害的，所以答案选 E harmless。下一句Officials are working to curb their numbers. Curb 阻止，但是这种 lizards 蜥蜴是入侵物种之一 ，which 可能有3 effects on ecosystems. Ecosystems 生态系统。第三题呢，我们要填形容词或者分词来修饰后面的 effects 效果。既然绿鬣蜥危害其他的动植物，表示会带来破坏性的影响，所以答案选 C destructive 破坏性的。第二段要说明原因，是什么让物种变成侵略性的呢？ The species in question isn't endemic. In question 修饰 species 表示正在讨论的 endemic 某地特有的。绿鬣蜥不是当地特有的，但是 adapts remarkably well. Adapt 适应 remarkably 值得注意的，而且它们会快速繁殖，侵略性的扩张。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, let's continue with our lesson. Again, we're talking about invasive species and how they are putting the environment in danger. Now, we did mention the example of the green iguana. Their populations have exploded since the year 2015. And I think they said here that they probably got in because people had them as pets and just got tired of taking care of them, and they just let them go. That happens all the time when people are just bored of the pets, and they showed it to their friends. The friends are no longer impressed. It's not worth keeping the animal anymore, so just let it go. And unfortunately, we've got a big problem with green iguanas now.
Yeah, wow. Who would have thought? I never would have thought. Can you believe their numbers have multiplied 27 times over? So there are 27 times more iguanas than there were in 2015. That's crazy. So these species that do this, that invade and aggressively take over others' habitats, you can label them as invasive. Yeah. So the species that do this with the potential to cause harm are labeled invasive. So they label them invasive even before they actually do damage. If you have the potential to do something, it means it could happen in the future. It looks like you have the capacity to become or develop into that thing in the future. If your teachers in school say you have a lot of potential, it means they think you have a lot of talent or a lot of ability, that if you work hard at it, you'll be successful. Unfortunately, we're talking about a lizard or an iguana that has potential. So they can be any living thing. Anything that's labeled invasive can be an insect or a reptile like a lizard, or even plants and fungi or fungi. I think you pronounced it fungi or fungi, didn't you, Tom?
Yeah, my dictionary gave that pronunciation, so I went with that pronunciation, although I think fungi is actually more common, I think.
That's the plural form of the noun fungus. Okay, so mushrooms are a type of fungus. So anyway, once these species, these invasive species, grow in number, like 27 times what they used to be, they consume or eat up or use so many resources that they endanger the lives of local species. We got to take care of our local plants and animals first.
We certainly do, so that's a problem with these invasive species. They continue to reproduce, they grow in number, and they also consume the resources that local creatures depend on.
Yeah.
Now, here in the next paragraph it says, the way that non-native organisms arrive in other ecosystems is mainly through human activity. So that's the main way they get into an environment, through human activity. Surprise! It seems like people are always causing these problems in some way. There might be other ways. Maybe they fly long distances or something like that, or they float on a piece of wood or something. But for the most part, they enter these ecosystems through human activity, like human traveling. So here in the next sentence it says, as people travel, we often bring other living things with us, whether we intend to do so or not. I remember hearing about this in Europe or whatever during the plague or something. Rats were on ships or something like that, and they just managed to get into environments, and then the bugs that were on the rats caused that plague, so they were spread that way by rats being transported on boats and stuff like that. So that's an example of animals kind of tagging along with humans as they travel.
Well, here it says ships might ferry. Ferry here is being used as a verb. So if you ferry something, it means you're using a type of ship or boat to go from one piece of land to another. So they ferry aquatic species or species that live in the water, or even small land animals across the sea. Tom was just telling the story about those gross rats. And some plants are imported for cultivation in enclosed gardens. They can escape and become wild. So it's interesting. I didn't think you could import plants here. It had to go through a lot of inspection and stuff. So, but it does happen. So as for Taiwan's green iguanas, those are the invasive species we started talking about. Officials presume the original wild generation was comprised of pets released by irresponsible owners. Sometimes those pets belong to little kids, and these iguanas get out of their glass container. A lot of them live in sort of a fishbowl kind of thing, and they get out, and then the little kids can't find them. They cry, and those iguanas get out, and they find other iguanas, and they mate. And they produce little baby iguanas. Now, when you presume something, it just means you're assuming something's true based on a good guess that you have. You probably don't have all the facts, but it's based or supposed that something is true based on kind of probability. So it's kind of a guessing game. You presume this sort of thing. So they're guessing that the original wild generation was comprised or made up of pets that their owners lost. And I think they're probably referring to little children losing their little pet iguanas.
Could be. Yes, they begged Mommy and Daddy to get them a green iguana from the pet store, and they quickly got bored of it and wanted something else. And the parents said, well, I guess we'll just let it go then. And that's what happened. But that's what the officials are presuming, that these animals were released as pets. That's what they presumed. Yes, indeed, as you said, to presume means to kind of conclude without really knowing exactly why, but having a good idea about that. Oh, you're from Taiwan. Well, I presume that you like to eat chou tofu. Well, not everybody in Taiwan likes to eat chou tofu, but I think a lot of Westerners presume that people from Taiwan like chou tofu. But here in the next paragraph, it says, managing the numbers of invasive species is an uphill battle. Okay, if something's an uphill battle, that means it's very difficult to do.
You're told to be cautious. It just means you're going to take extra care. You're not going to do anything dangerous or risky. So you're going to pay attention to potential problems or dangers around you. So be cautious with which plants you grow. Make sure you're growing some local species and opt or choose for native species over exotic ones. Exotic means coming from a foreign country. It seems kind of cool if they're exotic. Things that are not seen very often, that are more rare, are exotic. So learn about invasive species in your area. See, now I know about the green iguanas. I never knew that they were invading Taiwan. Now I know. So you need to report anytime you see some sort of invasive species to your local land manager. Ask around your neighborhood, find out who that would be, and report any sightings, or just when you see some sort of invasive species, make sure you tell the proper authorities.
Yeah, look it up online, or maybe ask a police officer where the local land manager is. And if we're responsible for the choices we make, we can help to fight off invaders in our ecosystems. I think we can also learn how to eat those animals. I think I saw a news report. Some people down in the south are trying to actually capture these iguanas and kill them and cut them up and fry them and eat them. I don't know if people are going to get used to that, but that is a possible solution. I tend to be more vegetarian, so I would be probably against that idea, but still, if it does help control the population of iguanas, hey, chow down on some iguana fried rice or something like that, or iguana pork chops or whatever, and maybe that would be quite tasty to enjoy. Except not pork, though. That's pig meat. I don't know what you would call iguana meat, but I'm sure it probably
lizard meat.
I'm imagining it would probably taste a lot like chicken.
Hey, if that's the only meat available, even I'm going to become a vegetarian. So there.
There you go. Yeah, even vegetarians, when they're starving, will eat green iguanas. Okay, that brings us to the end of our lesson for today. We're going to now listen to our Chinese teacher.
Species that do this are 4 invasive. 有这种造成伤害潜能的物种是怎么样的侵略？第4题可以放副词来形容 invasive， 或者是 PP 来配合前面的 are 形成被动。这句要补充入侵物种的定义。 所以我们答案就选 J labeled， 表示这种物种会被标记为入侵物种。下一句，它们可能是任何生物，从昆虫到爬虫类，甚至植物或者是菌类。Once 一旦这些物种 grow in number， 相当于 become more numerous， 表示变得很多。They consume 他们会消耗这么多的fat， 他们会危害当地物种。第五题在 many 之后，所以要放复数的名词做 consume 的受词。入侵物种会消耗许多资源，答案选 B resources 资源。到第三段，讨论这物种是如何侵入。The way that non-native arrive 非本地6抵达其他生态的方式，主要是经由人类活动。那这空格我们就放复数的名词，当 that 子句的主词，搭配 arrive。这题是一个换字的考法，用生物题 organism 取代上一句提到的 species， 故答案选 I。接着，随着人们旅行，我们经常夹带生物。不管是否有意 intended to do or not， intend 打算，意图 ships might ferry 船只会运送水生物种或其他。ferry 这里当作动词，表示用船运送，和一些植物 imported for 7 import 是进口，那植物进口通常都是为了种植，所以第7题选 H cultivation 种植耕作。最后一句，至于台湾绿鬣蜥，官员猜测原始野放那一带 was comprised of pets 8 was comprised of 组成，那这题我们要放过去分词，搭配后面的 by irresponsible owners 被不负责任的主人，修饰前面的 pets， 所以答案选 A released 被释放。最后一段呼吁大家一起努力。管理入侵物种的数量是 uphill battle， 上坡很累，是辛苦的战役，但是我们都能帮忙，要小心选中植物 and 9 native species over exotic ones， exotic 外来的，这句用 and 连接2个祈使句，所以9要选原形动词，我们要选择本土物种，因此答案选 D opt for 选择。另外也要了解你区域的入侵物种，回报任何 sightings 目击给土地管理员。最后一句，如果我们为自己的选择负责 we can help to 10 invaders， 这题考不定词 to 后面要放原形动词，我们可以帮助击退入侵者，所以答案选 F fight off 击退。以上是今天的讲解，谢谢收听。
That's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And please join us again next time for another edition of our program. And maybe you can listen to our program while you're having a plate of fried iguana. It's probably going to be very tasty. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.